today.
I call to order the Rosemont Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, July 25th. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any additions to tonight's agenda?
There are not, Madam Chair.
We will move on to the audience input section of the agenda. This is for anyone in the audience that would like to address the Planning Commission for items that are not on tonight's agenda. Seeing none, we will move forward to the consent agenda. Our consent agenda this evening includes the minutes from our May 28th, 2024 regular meeting. Are there any questions on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It has been moved by Commissioner Kenninger, seconded by Commissioner Reed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have a number of public hearings this evening. That is next on our agenda. We will start with a request by Maplewood Development for preliminary and final plat approval for Amberfield's 17th edition to create 99 single-family homes, single-family lots, excuse me. Alicia, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm presenting on behalf of Maplewood Development for preliminary and final plat approval for Amberfield's 17th edition. So just a summary of request. They're requesting approval of preliminary and final plats for Amberfield's 17th edition to create 99 single-family residential lots. I do want to note that they did come forward for Amberfield's 17th in March of 2024. This is a resubmittal, and we'll kind of get into why that is later on. So the site is located in the south central portion of the Amberfields development area. It's located south of County Road 42 and west of Akron Avenue. It's adjacent to Amberfield's 16th edition to the west and Amberfield's 13th and 14th edition to the east. Here is the master plan that was developed in 2021, so we, for the public, can kind of get an idea. I'm sure we've seen it plenty of times. Area L is where I'm referring to for Amberfield's 17th edition. Here is Amberfield's 16th, and then 13th, and then 13th, and then 14th. The lot is designated as mixed-use residential and is zoned as R1, low-density residential. The total area is approximately 31 acres. The applicant is proposing 99 lots with 5 outlots throughout the site. 4 of the lots act as buffer between Amberfield's 16th, 13th, and 14th. And then there's 1 outlot providing green space for an 8-foot trail to connect to the Amberfield Central Park area. And there'll be 2 proposed access roads to enter the subdivision, along with a couple of looped internal roads. So here you can kind of just see the outlots highlighted since it's a little small. So I just wanted to show comparison, what's the difference between March and June. The March submittal was for 120 single-family lots, so they're reducing the density by 21 lots. And you can see in the March submittal, there's actually 3 internal outlots in blocks 3, 4, and 6. Because the density is reduced, those outlots are now for residential lots. They were originally intended for just some green space. Construction will be in 2 phases. The first phase of development will consist of 50 lots and the eastern portions of the roadway system, and then the second phase will consist of 49 single-family lots with the remaining portions of the roadway. There will be temporary cul-de-sacs both at the end of Adara Ridge Road, both to the west and east. The westmost temporary cul-de-sac was a request of Planning Commission last Planning Commission meeting in March as a condition of approval, and so they've kept that. The site meets and exceeds all minimum lot areas and widths. These are a little bit larger lots, and they meet all front, side, and yard setbacks of 25 feet, 5 feet for the interior lots, 20 feet for corner lots, and 20 feet for rear yard setbacks. The subdivision will be served by city sewer and water extending throughout those internal roads. Stormwater will be managed and will flow to detention and retention ponds located in that Amberfield Central Park area. And as a condition of approval, it requires conformance with requirements all stated within the engineer's memo dated June 20th, 2024. So per city code, 1 tree is required per lot per frontage in the R1 and R2 zoning districts, totaling what would be calculated 115 trees. This plan is providing 119 trees with 2 trees per corner lot average. That would add approximately 10 caliper inches to the total inches that are required of the entire Amberfield's PUD development, which is the minimum is 1,983 caliper inches, and so they have a remaining 1,428 caliper inches for future developments within Amberfields. And a landscape surety of $39,270 is also required as a condition of approval. So here is the plat. So the final plat is approval of Phase 1, and then this outlot will be outlotted as Outlot C, if that makes sense wording-wise. And so here you can see the Phase 1 final plat. It's those first 50 lots and Outlot A and B for construction. And then Maplewood Development will come forward down the line for the second phase of development for another final plat approval. So the recommendation is a motion to recommend the City Council approve the preliminary and final plats for Amberfield 17th edition, subject to conditions 1 through 6. And I can take any questions, and
Thank you.
the applicant is here too.
Thank you. Are there any questions at this time for city staff?
Just one clarifying question. The remaining 1,428 caliper inches, that's across the remaining plats we'll see, right? So if we see, say, 3 more phases, this one has about 500 inches. 3 more phases would knock that remaining out, is that right? Am I thinking that right?
Yeah, so it's kind of, I realize you probably don't, so the requirement for the entire PUD is 1,983 caliper inches. Current mitigation is 545 caliper inches planted, and so this would add 10 caliper inches, leaving 1,428 caliper inches throughout the total development area.
So this plan's only reducing it by 10 caliper inches,
Correct.
but we've reduced it along the way.
Okay, so that seems like a pretty big gap, and the question may be for the applicant about when that might, what their thoughts are on how that will be met.
Commissioner Reed, I can speak to that briefly. The staff has received a planting schedule for the Central Park open area, and that would have more than the required mitigation trees in there. So that's where they're really going to be making up that shortfall.
Got it, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you. This item is a public hearing item, so at this time we will open up the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this item may do so at this time, coming to the podium, stating your name and address for the record. Seeing none, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Kenninger and seconded by Commissioner Reed to close the public hearing. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Are there any final questions or comments for city staff on this item? Seeing none, we could move forward with the motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend the City Council approve the preliminary and final plats for Amberfield 17th edition, subject to conditions 1 through 6.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Biedner, seconded by Commissioner Ellis. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This item will move forward to City Council on July 2nd. The next item on our Planning Commission public hearing agenda this evening is for an amendment to a conditional use permit for place of worship in the R1 low-density residential zoning district at 2058 Bonaire Path West. And I will turn this one over to Anthony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this item is related to a property located near the corner of Bacardi and Bonaire Path. The Planning Commission and Council approved a conditional use permit for the property owner to have a place of worship on that site, which is located in the R1 zoning district. That was in 2022. At that time, the applicant and property owner had anticipated converting an existing garage into an assembly space. Staff was apprehensive or didn't really think that that would be entirely feasible. Therefore, a condition was included in that original CUP approval or conditional use permit that the applicant receive all required building permits specifically to convert the existing garage. The applicant did determine that it was the case, that it wasn't feasible, and did decide to move forward with a site plan review, which was approved by the Planning Commission to construct a new structure for assembly on that site rather than go through the conversion of that garage structure. Therefore, the applicant did start the building permit process, and in some of the back and forth of getting that approved, the existing garage itself was too close to the proposed new building. So we were working through that and reviewing the conditions. It appeared that the first condition that specifically referred to the applicant having to convert that garage would be problematic, as they were no longer going to be using that garage, so there would be nothing to convert there. So the proposed conditions of the amended CUP were provided by the city's attorney to help clear that up, and I will go through those in more detail going forward. So again, the site is located just southwest of the intersection of Bacardi Avenue and Bonaire Path. Further west, you see South Robert Trail, Highway 3, and then if you move further east, you would get to Akron Avenue. Here's a close-in view. This is an aerial from the 2022 approval with the garage here that the Al Medina Association was planning on converting. The site plan that they did get approved by the Planning Commission shows the new structure here located kind of southwest of the two existing house and garage. As you can see, this garage is pretty close to the proposed new structure. The building official identified a need to either add more fire-safe walls to that garage structure for that separation, or to remove that garage entirely, which the applicant and the property owner has determined to be the best course of action. So, as I said, the original conditions, as you can see, the first condition there, the applicant shall apply for and receive all required building permits to convert the existing garage to an assembly use. The city's attorney said that might create some problems down the line if they're not actually converting the garage and moving forward with their proposed site plan. So that was changed, the language referring to the garage, and then also the original conditions, specifically the last one there, number 5, refer to the fire marshal's memo. The new conditions just lay them out right in the conditions of the conditional use permit. So the proposed conditions for an amended conditional use permit still require the applicant to apply for and receive all required building permits. It simply removes the language related to the conversion of the garage. And then additionally, letter F there lists out the requirements of the fire marshal's memo to make that more clear as well. So there is some overlap, as staff had initially put some of those specific conditions in the conditions above from the fire marshal's memo. So they're all laid out there to reiterate the fact that those are the requirements. There is no changes to the proposed site plan that the Planning Commission approved in 2023. That is still going forward and going through the building permit process. That process will continue if this conditional use permit amendment is approved by council. So I can answer any questions you may have. I would just note that concerns received by staff and the Planning Commission through these different approvals related to concerns about traffic, parking on city streets, which public streets anyone can park on. But with the implementation of their site plan, there will be on-site parking. So the off-site parking would no longer be occurring there. But again, the main concerns coming from the neighborhood to the west, Birchwood Avenue here, and these aren't necessarily concerns that we hear specifically related to the use from them, but they do have a lot of concerns ongoing related to traffic due to the fact that this is a very straight road connecting two collector roads here in the city. So they do see their share, more than their share of traffic, which again is an ongoing concern for that neighborhood, separate from the proposed use on the site, or in addition to.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for staff at this time?
Yeah, Anthony, it's just one, and I wish I had asked this, given you advance notice on it, but on Birchwood there, they added a traffic deterrent, or to slow down traffic in the middle of the road, kind of a set of poles, to slow down and curve around. Has that been working? Is there anything else planned by the city there? Is that just expected to be in place permanently to help with the situation?
So without engineering present to talk about that, the city does have a traffic safety committee that reviews concerns, and this was one of the results of the work that they were doing. What community development has been trying to do and is hoping to do in the future is to increase this connection between Biscayne, between Connemara and Bonaire Path, extend Biscayne north with further development of this area. This is a pretty open, ripe for development piece in the city. Creating connection from Biscayne at Connemara up to Bonaire Path would hopefully alleviate some of that cut-through traffic there. Additionally, having Autumn Avenue constructed here draws some more traffic from the east going down to Connemara Trail. So I can't speak to that kind of temporary traffic circle that's up there, and how effective that is and how permanent that will be. But it is just kind of one thing that we implemented or staff implemented to try to alleviate some of the higher speeds.
And I suspect is somewhat effective, and it's good to hear that there's even longer term approaches being planned. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, the biggest thing is to create more connections, so that's not the only one that people go to.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Any other questions for staff?
So going back to the parking, I think I read somewhere, is it 56 capacity for the building?
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head since the site plan review what it was.
Yeah.
They provided parking as well as a proof of parking on the original approval. So I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but yeah, there was parking provided in the site plan.
Any other questions for staff?
I just have a quick question about the parking too. I'm just curious for, and maybe I don't have the actual, I guess, cited agreement in there, but why is the parking lot necessarily need to be paved versus, like, let's say another business or structure is like aggregate or gravel?
On all properties that are located in areas that are served by city and sewer water, parking is required to be paved with asphalt or concrete.
All right, that makes sense. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Anthony. This item is a public hearing item, so at this time, we will open up the public hearing. Anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this item may do so at this time, coming forward to the podium, stating your name and address for the record. Seeing none, I will make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Kenninger, seconded by Commissioner Ellis. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The hearing is now closed. We have a motion before us.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Take a motion to recommend City Council approve the amended conditional use permit for a place of worship at 2058 Bonaire Path West, subject to conditions A through F with sub-conditions 1 through 7 under letter F.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Bugai, seconded by Commissioner Reed. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. This item will move forward to the City Council on July 2nd. The next item on our agenda this evening is a variance request by Nick REITBERGER to reduce the side yard setback standard for surface parking and driveways and to increase the maximum lot coverage standard to allow for an existing driveway extension to remain on the property. And I will turn this over to Julia.
Right, so this is a variance request by Nick REITBERGER for the property at 3574 152nd Street West. So a little bit of a summary of the request. So the applicant is requesting a variance to reduce the side yard setback standard for surface parking and driveways from 5 feet to 0 feet, and then to increase the maximum lot coverage standard from 30 feet to 30% to 37% to allow for an existing driveway extension to remain on the property. Staff is unable to make findings to recommend approval of the variance request and is recommending denial. So a little aerial of the site location. So the property is located at 3574 152nd Street West, which is located in the southwest portion of the city, west of Chippendale Avenue, and is in the R1 low-density residential zoning district. So a little bit of aerial from May 2022 to April 2024. So staff became aware of this construction project prior to the driveway extension being finalized. Staff had driven by the property and informed the property owner that a driveway permit was needed prior to any work being done. The applicant met with the city staff to apply for a driveway permit, where staff informed the applicant that the proposed driveway extension would not be able to be approved due to setback regulations and not meeting that 5-foot minimum setback, but a driveway permit was approved for replacing the existing driveway footprint that is shown in May 2022. So staff went out to the property to conduct a final inspection of the driveway, which is where staff found that the not approved extension was constructed on site, which you can see in the April 2024 updated aerial imagery that you see. And then here are a couple oblique aerial images from April 2023 to April 2024. You can see that extension to the driveway. So in addition to the setback requirements from the side property lines, there are also no structures, which include patios, slabs of concrete allowed within easement areas, and there are 5-foot side yard easement areas located on this property. So this driveway extension is located in an easement area currently. And a couple site photos. So the photo on the left is showing when staff went out to the site prior to the pouring of the extension. And then to the right is when that was completed, that staff went out for that final inspection to see that driveway extension completed. Also, the applicant's narrative did state that the need for the driveway extension is because of the neighboring property to the west, which you can see on this photo is directly to the right. That due to the higher elevation, there does cause draining issues to the subject property, but while reviewing the neighboring area, there are similar properties to this, and they were able to meet those side yard setback regulations and also lot coverage regulations. So there are 5 criteria that the Board of Appeals and Adjustments need to review before considering a variance request. And I'll go through the 5 for this one. So the first one is the variance request is in harmony with the purposes and intent of the ordinance. Finding was, while driveways are allowed within the R1 zoning district, it is staff's interpretation that the intent of the ordinance is to limit maximum lot coverage allowed on the property and side yard setback standards to ensure that drainage on a property does not become compromised. Staff finds the variance request to be in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance. 2, the variance is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Finding as the site is designated as low-density residential, the variance request is consistent with that designation. Finding 3, the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner. Finding is staff finds that given the information received from the applicant, the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner. And then finding 4, there are unique circumstances to the property which are not created by the landowner. Staff does not find any unique circumstances to the property that would necessitate a variance in order for the applicant to have reasonable use of the property. There is a 5-foot easement area along the side yard property lines that is there to assist with drainage. The newly added driveway extension now encroaches that easement area, which could ultimately affect drainage in that area as well. There are properties similar to the subject parcel in areas that do not exceed the maximum lot coverage allowed within the R1 zoning district and that meet the surface parking and driveway side yard setback minimums. And then standard 5, granting the variance does not alter the essential character of locality. Finding as the essential character of locality would not be altered by granting the variance. A single-family home with driveways is consistent with the character and residential nature of locality. So with that, recommended action, staff recommends to the commission, acting as the Board of Appeals and Adjustments, to adopt a resolution denying the variance request. If the commission finds that the unique circumstances that necessitates the issuance of a variance to have a reasonable use of the property, it must articulate that for the record. Staff will draft an updated resolution, which includes that finding to be signed by the commission chair. At this time, I can take questions from the commission, but I do know that the applicant is present in the audience as well.
Thank you, Julia. I'm going to ask you just to go back to the first variance finding there. Oh, no, sorry. So I think I read this maybe a little differently initially, and now that I read it again, the variance is in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance. And then the finding indicates that the intent of the ordinance is to limit maximum lot coverage allowed on a property and side yard setback standards to ensure drainage. But the variance request is not in alignment with the maximum lot coverage and the side yard setbacks. So I guess now when I reread it, I'm a little confused on how we find that it is in harmony with number 1.
More so, we're finding that the driveways is in harmony with purpose of the intent, but I do understand where you're coming from with that. I guess that's up for interpretation from the commission.
Yeah. Initially, when I read it, I was like, oh, yeah, it's in harmony. But then when I read it again, I'm like, wait a second. If we're saying harmony is the intent of the ordinance is to limit that, I find that it wouldn't be in harmony with that one. But
I agree with that, Madam
you agree? Okay.
And I guess I read it a different way, that if the harmony is to ensure that the drainage on the property doesn't become compromised, if it is sloped and still allowing that drainage, then it would, in my mind, still meet that intent and then be in harmony. So I know we have a little bit of disagreement here, but it's.
I think it can meet if the intent is to allow for drainage. I read the finding as saying this variance request isn't necessarily inharmonious with that. It goes beyond it, but it's, in sense of that, the lot coverage goes beyond what it is called for, but it's not, if you look at the intent of it, the intent was to provide for drainage, and the variance isn't out of harmony with that intent, is how I read it. But yeah, I think you're right, there's disagreement.
What's the purpose? You said this is an easement area?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of that easement?
If there ever needs to be work done within that area as well, I know our city engineering and if there ever needs to be work done with utilities or drainage, we leave that area open so that, let's say a property owner puts a structure on there, the city doesn't want to have to destroy that or take that out, and is at the cost of the property owner as well. So, and also it's supposed to leave room for drainage as well. in that area, so.
Right.
Yeah, it's specifically a drainage and utility
Yeah.
easement. And, when we see a lot of the grading plans for developments, not the mass grading, but when they do the final site grading, there's usually a swale between the two properties in that basically 10-foot area, the two 5-foot easements, to allow the drainage. So when we get, for example, fence permit requests, the condition for every fence approval must not impede drainage or alter the grade in order to specifically maintain that water flow. Because you don't want to be, one house to be sending water over to the next property.
So to me, it seems that we don't have facts in the record showing that drainage will not become comprised, right? Because that's a drainage easement specifically for drainage purposes. Now we have a driveway on top of it. We don't have enough to say, oh, it's going to be fine. Drainage is not comprising, right? I mean, that's how I see it.
I would certainly, Madam Chair, let the Planning Commission, debate your point there, but I think from a staff perspective, we can certainly support that point of view.
I had a question. If you can go to the slide where it's got the house next to it as well. So does that house next to it, are they also meeting that 5-foot setback? Because I see a car on the side of the garage there as well.
From our aerial imagery, from what I was able to measure out, they did meet that 5-foot from their side property line. But again, it's hard to fully say without knowing where the property pins and lines fully are. But at
Julie, can you
least,
go back to that other slide that
Yeah.
showed the two side by side? There we go.
Yeah.
I would also note, sorry, Madam Chair, that the property boundaries on these aerials, these are not surveys. So don't rely on these for marking out a fence or anything like that. But the applicant's garage is constructed, or driveway, excuse me, is constructed to their property line based on the survey we've reviewed. So there is a 5-foot gap between the applicant's new driveway and the neighbor's existing one, which would be a 5-foot setback.
That line right here in the April 2024, that bisects that driveway there, on the side of the neighbor, is that the property line or is that the setback line?
property line, those yellow ones that are shown on the images are the property lines, but like Anthony had mentioned, these aren't fully accurate as,
They're approximates.
Yeah, we review
Approximate.
surveys for
Yeah.
permits, not.
Yeah. So that's an estimate. The yellow ones are the estimated property lines.
And then a follow-up question is, if this gets denied, I mean, the driveway's already built, what takes place at that point?
Staff will work with the city attorney to move forward with enforcement with that and to work with the property owner with that. Or for enforcement for that.
To become in compliance with the city
Yeah.
code.
Okay.
And so that would mean removing the part that's within that 5-foot easement area.
That would be a reasonable
Yeah.
conclusion, Madam Chair, but we would also just make sure that we're clear that we would consult with our attorney on a
Yeah.
path forward after we would discuss it with the applicant.
And to be clear too, I think you said this, but I mean, the applicant, this plan with this extension that's shown was reviewed by the city staff and denied, right? So there was a very clear denial of this plan.
Correct, yep. The applicant did come forward to the city where consulted with city staff, and city staff did inform them that that extension did not meet setback regulations, but a building or a driveway permit was approved for the replacement of the existing driveway in the original footprint that you see in the May 2022 aerial.
Regardless of maybe our back and forth with item number 1, I think item number 4 is really the one that, if we find that we don't agree with that, then maybe we have to circle back to number 1. But I think number 4 is probably more important to discuss and make sure that we come to a conclusion. And can you go to that so that we can read through that quickly?
I guess my comment is from the meeting before last, where we showed consistency in what number 4 meant to that property owner, and to be consistent across the board is where I stand as far as a planning commissioner. Because if you start getting, one person can do it, but one can't, as far as zoning and variances, then I think that leaves us wide open for a lot of things. So my finding, my perspective would be can be consistent as if we were from the person that also had a variance question last time.
I agree. When I read this, I don't see any, I agree with the finding that this does not meet the requirement. I think there's other ways they could have approached any drainage issues they had. And this is, it seems pretty open and shut based on that.
Before we move too far forward, I do want to remind us that this is a public hearing item tonight, so let's, if there's no more questions for staff, we'll open the public hearing so we can hear from the public on this item before moving forward with conclusions. Any other questions for staff at this time?
Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. This item is a public hearing item this evening, so at this time, I will open up the public hearing. Anyone in the audience who would like to speak may do so at this time, coming to the podium, stating your name and address for the record.
My name is Nick REITBERGER. I am the property owner at 3574 152nd Street West. I would disagree that I am over the impermeable square footage of the, like the city said, at 37%. I think I'm less than 30% even. And then also, the neighbor to the west, their driveway sits about a foot higher than where my land was, so it pushes their water from their property onto mine. That's why I was getting water backing up on my property, which led me to do the driveway, redo the driveway.
Did you consider any other options for the water?
I did not, no.
Okay.
As far as the percentage of impervious surface area of the property, how did you come up with your calculations that you think you're less than 30%?
I took measurements of the property, which I don't remember those off the top of my head. I do have them wrote down at home. Measured the driveway replacement, and then also the size of the house and the patio in the backyard too as well. I did also drive around the neighborhood as well. I did find 20 other addresses, and I brought a list of those addresses as well with me tonight that are within 5 feet of that drainage and utility easement as well. And then also I did notice in a new development that there are air conditioners in that 5-foot drainage and utility easement too as well. I do have addresses of those as well, and that I got 21 addresses with me for that as well.
Thank you. Any other comments for the public hearing tonight? Any other questions for the applicant?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, so on the unique circumstances, I think that's, the ball's kind of in your court here of providing enough in the record, and I think you're putting some good facts in to help yourself with the air conditioning and the things you've seen like that. Can you speak more to the this idea of the drainage, how that driveway that you constructed is necessary, uniquely because of that property to prevent drainage onto yours?
The concrete makes the water run quicker off the property versus just on whether it be landscaping rock or grass there. So the water just runs quicker off the property, helps it get out.
goes down, so it goes down the driveway into the gutter, basically?
Yep, and there is adequate slope, allowing the water to continue to run. I was having drainage issues backing up into the garage. I did get mold in the garage, which made me have to tear the sheetrock off and replace that as well, remediate the mold. And now, even with these heavy rains, I haven't had any issues.
And so before, like, that whole area where the driveway is now, it would just be a pond or something, basically, and,
It would pool water for a while, yeah. Also, my house is a right swing and the neighbor's house is a left swing, so our garages are closer together, and the neighbor's house does sit about 12 inches higher than my garage. So that's why their driveway is higher.
so that's all, I mean, and that's the kind of stuff, like, I think you need to be saying to put into the record to back up your case here, and I think you're doing a good job. But there's also the fact that I understand you asked staff originally, can you do this? And staff said no, but you went and did it anyway.
That is not true.
Okay.
I was unaware that we needed a permit for a driveway replacement or a driveway extension. And then staff told me a neighbor had called in. When the city inspector told me a neighbor had called in when he showed up on the job site that day. But in this report, it says that they just happened to be driving by. So there's a little discrepancy there, I guess.
And that neighbor, the neighbor that the driveway now abuts right there, is the neighbor fine with your driveway?
He is here tonight, and I'll let him speak about that, I guess. I don't want to speak for him.
Okay. All right, well, thank you.
Fair enough. On that line though, so regardless if the city happened to be in the neighborhood as the report states, or if it was a neighbor that called in, from my understanding, when they told you that a permit was needed, then you came in for the permit, staff told you you couldn't put the extension on as you had planned, but issued you a permit for the same footprint as the original driveway, but then you ended up moving forward with the extension. Is that true?
That is not true. As you can see in the one photo, when the staff arrived, that was already in. That portion of the driveway was already placed. Can I
Okay.
go show you
Yeah,
that photo?
you can use the arrows to go back if you want in the.
This is, the photo on the left is when the inspector had arrived, and you can already see that concrete had been poured.
Okay.
But this was after you received the driveway permit?
No.
Oh,
The picture on the left is
There was no permit prior to this.
when they came out and there was no permit.
Correct, yes.
I see. You didn't seek a permit at all before doing this?
Correct. I was unaware that we needed a permit for this.
Did you have contractors do this, or is this just?
No, I did it myself.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on this item this evening?
Robert Beatty, 3592 152nd Street West. I'm his neighbor to the left, or to the west. Really, I mean, aesthetically, we really have no problems with the added parking or at the parking side or the added pad. I mean, honestly, you go up and down every single street in our area. Everybody is utilizing that space. Fortunately, his is paved. I mean, there's plenty of vehicles up and down those streets that are parking on grass, have just dumped down gravel. So I don't have any comment in terms of, I wasn't unaware that the drainage was an issue for him. I can see where it could be. That third stall for us was already, we've been in our house for 9 years. That was already paved, that was already laid before we had moved in. At some point in time in the future, we would be looking to address that, repave it, and fix the grade. But in terms of any drainage issues, we don't see anything on our side. Even Said we had discussed the possibility prior to the project. I don't know about the process along the way. I was there that the day that I honestly was home. I work from home. The inspector showed up. I was actually standing out there when they showed up, so I can confirm that that portion of the driveway had already been poured before the inspector showed up and told him he needed a permit. So I can corroborate that time of events. But outside of that, I mean, being the neighbor that shares that property line, that would be the loudest about it if an objection. We really don't have any issues with it. It's very common practice to use that portion alongside the garage throughout most of the neighborhoods around us. And honestly, to see one that's paved and looks finished is a lot better aesthetically than what I see driving around the neighborhoods. And since then, I think we've seen at least 2 or 3 on our street that have been poured, whether they've had permits or not. They weren't poured prior to, so.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on this item this evening?
My name is Steve Watrud, 9070 90th Court, Inver Grove Heights, Minnesota. I was there the day I actually helped Nick as a friend. In looking at these pictures, especially the close-ups, you can see how much higher the neighbor's driveway is. Nick had talked to me about his drainage issues, and when the neighbor's driveway to the west is 1 foot higher and the driveway and the garages are right next to each other, leaves very little room for any drainage to go. The best way to get that water to get out of there is down a concrete. You can have grass, you can have gravel, but that neighbor's runoff, if you look at his garage, the roofs are running that way, everything is running that way. When this development was designed, I feel there was an error made allowing the house to be so much higher with 2 garages abutting each other. That's one of the rare and unique issues that you were looking for. It's when you have the 2 driveways so close, the water from the neighbors running off, it left very little, room. He's got his backyard with very spongy. This year's wet, but you're going to get that. But every other year. I think he was in compliance. He tried to work with the city afterwards. He did go to the city. I guess ignorance is no excuse for the law of not knowing you need a permit, but usually when you tear out and replace, you're doing your own. You sometimes don't. Every city's different, but I have the position that if you look at how close the neighbor's driveway is to this driveway and the elevation, and with the water coming, he needed to do something to alleviate that moisture coming to the house. Nobody wants mold. Nobody wants water intrusion. So that would be my comments if you have.
Thank you.
Anything?
Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on this item this evening? Seeing none, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Kenninger, seconded by Commissioner Reed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Public hearing is now closed.
Well, I'll get started. It's a tough situation, and especially because the work's been done, and so I'm sensitive to that. But I don't think the drainage is a reason to approve this. I'm pretty sure my driveway is a good foot above my neighbor's, and like Anthony mentioned, we've got a swale that goes between our yards, and sure enough, the water does collect there. So I think there are other ways to mitigate a drainage issue rather than just going and building the driveway. So I'm not in favor of approving this.
Julia, can you speak a little bit to the process? So if there's there's certainly a drainage issue, or was a drainage issue. What other remedies would have been done, or is this a reasonable remedy to a drainage issue?
I know our engineering department more deals with drainage issues such as that. I know some properties put in drain tile. Again, that's more their purview when there is issues with drainage. So I don't have as much insight on that compared to our engineering and public works department.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I can maybe add to Julia's point there. I mean, our engineering team is always happy to, consult or, talk to a homeowner who may be having certain types of issues on their property. While they may not be able to prescribe an exact solution, they could at least point them for some resources or some direction, whether it's, pursuing different plantings or a drain tile, as Julia acknowledged, but, that's one of the resources that we have available, to at least offer some professional expertise. But at the end of the day, not necessarily solve a problem based on, we're not sure why the issue could exist. So it's just also something to kind of keep in mind as you consider the application here this evening.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff?
One more question. Have there been other examples where variances like this have been approved in the city that might give some precedent?
Not to my knowledge, not in recent years. There haven't been any variance applications for driveway extensions.
There
I
was
don't know if
only,
Anthony
there was
has-
one variance request, and that was on a kind of a pie-shaped lot as they were going around their house to get back to a rear detached garage. But that only really kind of a corner of the driveway went into the variance or into the setback area.
So that
it
would
wasn't.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so it wasn't, that's the closest that we've had, that had unique circumstances, the shape of the lot. And the request was for only a portion of the driveway to actually encroach within that easement or setback area. Also, just if I can note that we get requests frequently for property owners looking to expand their driveways. We do tell a lot of property owners no. For a long time, a permit wasn't required if you were just simply resurfacing your driveway, because that would be maintenance. What staff found was that it often came with expansions of driveways, and that's where a lot of the nonconformities that you see around are from. So now every driveway, every resurfacing requires a permit because, people, they creep and they get bigger. I also would note that these houses are very far apart compared to what our new houses are being built at. And they're not suffering drainage issues with those short, narrower setbacks either. Grading is a very effective tool for managing drainage issues instead of going straight to concreting right up to your property line.
I have a question just in terms of like uniformity. I think the owner had stated something to the effect of there's other properties not in compliance that he had noticed. I guess, is that something you guys see often, or, and if so, are we doing the same kind of enforcement, or how does that work?
Well, if we can stop them before they do the driveway, we do. If it's a temporary or gravel, we work with them to at least get the required permits to get it paved in conformance with the code. A lot of times, properties do meet the setbacks with an extension on the side, just as the neighbor's property does in this case. But, not every house is exactly the same distance from the property lines, just the way they develop. And then we do have our seasonal code enforcement, but who does sequential inspections around the city. But if it's a paved driveway that's been there, unless it's usually if it's new that we get the calls on them.
Is staff concerned at all about the fact that it's paved now, that it may affect our drainage needs or our needs for that easement?
I would have to defer to our engineering staff on that. It is, you know, it is a drainage and utility easement. So if there are other needs for that easement area that go beyond just simply drainage, I mean, that's a bigger problem.
And, you know, that's also the reason that those types of structures or encroachments are not allowed within that area of a property in case there is a need to either correct drainage or to install private utilities in that area or public.
So the question I have is, if they had not gone to the actual property line and they would have stuck with the 5-foot variance and concreted a little bit on the side of their property, that would have been okay?
Without doing a calculation on the lot coverage, I think Julia referred to that, but if you, not taking lot coverage into account, the house has room for concrete along the side. I think, you know, if your goal is to park a vehicle over there, which I think it's pretty obvious looking at the driveway, that's the goal. Why would you, if not to park a car there? There wouldn't be room for that.
Right, but if it was, the goal is to just kind of try to help with the drainage and put some concrete in to kind of run it off, but not go up to the property line and keep their 5-foot variance, that would have been okay?
The 5-foot setback.
5-foot setback,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, if they,
Yeah, as
so
long
yeah,
as
I
they
think
have
if they
the
were within the
setback.
5-foot setback, then that wouldn't be an issue. There's still the question of the coverage, the lot coverage, but, so if that wasn't 37%, but if you take off part of that driveway, then that reduces that too, so. But I don't know if that, obviously that, it's poured and they,
Right, I'm just asking some questions of what if, what would have happened, what should have happened, what, because, I mean, obviously, yes, it looks nice, he did a nice job, the driveway looks great, but unfortunately, to be consistent with all of the citizens of Rosemont, when they have these same types of scenarios, you know, I know we just denied someone last month for similar reason of item number 4, it didn't have a unique circumstance, so that's probably where I'm going to stand.
Anthony, how long have we required permits for, obviously a permit's always been required if you were going to expand the driveway, but how long have we required them even for resurfacing existing?
About a year.
Year.
We've been doing it about a year with resurfacing.
And, sorry, Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'd only add too in that, you know, there's, that if you consider the aspect of permitting, so zoning permits, so things for like sheds, fences, and something like that, the idea of that is a proactive allowance of it, but it still does not negate what's required in city code. So it's meant to shift the knowledge of having a resident, which is impractical, to memorize the entire city code or look to reference it. You know, we always encourage residents to reach out to staff for any questions. But by requiring a permit on the front end, it allows that conversation to take place on the front end before an action is done. So the requirements in code have been there much longer than a year or a
Right, the 5-foot
reconstruction
setback
permit.
has been there much longer.
Correct.
And I happen to be reading the shed requirements right now, and I don't need a permit if I build one 200 square feet or less, but that doesn't mean I can put it right up to my property line. I still have to meet the setbacks of the 5 feet or 10-foot yard setbacks, even if I don't need a permit for the shed. And in this case, even if you didn't need a permit for the driveway, you still need to meet the setbacks on the sides. Sir, typically after we close the public hearing, we are not able to continue to take comments, but being that you are the applicant, if you would like to make a comment, I will allow it. I just ask you to come to the podium, however, so that it is recorded and heard properly.
I do own a landscape company, and we do a lot with drainage. I did try drain tile here, and it did not work, so that's why I also went to the concrete route as well. Also, the neighbor's driveway, I don't want to throw my neighbor under the bus, but like he had stated, it was there when he moved in. He is within that drainage and utility easement as well, so that's why I assumed that I could do that too as well. I was unaware of that. And so if you're going to be, I just kind of have a general question, if you're going to be consistent with the variance, that means you're going to make that builder take out all those air conditioners and move them out of the drainage and utility easement?
So So we have a variant, we have findings on the variance of the item before us. If those come through if somebody applies for a variance request for those, we would look at them. Otherwise, they could be reported to the city for code enforcement. But they wouldn't come before us. We would enforce, like the planning commission doesn't have purview of that. We just have it when someone applies for a variance request, we see it. But staff would be responsible for any code enforcement. I don't know the rule on air conditioners, per se. So I look at Anthony and Adam.
Without knowing what properties the applicant's referring to, I can't really speak to them too much. An air conditioner is a little different than a driveway, but I know that in some of our newer developments where they are building them closer together, we've spoken with our building officials about their concerns about air conditioners and stuff in there. So certainly if it's something that, and this is for the public that's watching too, if there's a code issue that you would like to make a complaint about, please do call the city and we can work with the property owners to remedy that.
I have a list of those properties with me. I would be happy to give you that list.
Yeah, you can leave it with one of the city staff or send it in via email for that.
Well, I think that's good. He's, the way I see it, I mean, he's presenting his side and he has what he believes is evidence to support his position, and I think that should be put in the record. I guess I'm sorry, well, I'll talk more after.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are you done? Anything
Yes.
else? Okay, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Whitman, go ahead.
I guess, I get it. I mean, look, I'm a land use attorney in another jurisdiction, and we have these situations arise where people, perhaps they're ignorant, and don't know that they have to go get a permit, and then all of a sudden they build a structure, they have something, and now the local jurisdiction is in the position of like, well, we've got this law that says you can't do this. They did it. Now what do we do? They got to like tear it down or, dig it up or what? It's a tough situation. On one hand, you can take the position of, well, it says right here you can't do it. They did it, and too bad. We don't care. You got to do it, okay? And we have to be consistent, right? We have to be consistent. We can't pick and choose. Well, I like that applicant, and that one didn't really, whatever. So in that sense, I get going along with staff's position to deny. However, I'm hearing some things that could be evidence to support this position, and I guess I'm not convinced that there are not unique circumstances to this particular situation. And I know staff's kind of saying there aren't, and we hear there are, but we don't have any actual, I feel, good enough evidence to make a conclusion either way right now. And so I guess what I would recommend, I don't know how exactly this would go, but we're hearing a lot of deferring to the engineers and things like that. What I would recommend is put this on hold, go back, have this applicant bring forth all the evidence they have to show that this is a unique circumstance, the drainage, the records, the address, whatever, the mold record. Have engineering weigh in on this, whether this is reasonable way to prevent drainage. And then staff come back after all those discussions and, evidence is looked at. Whatever conclusion staff has at that point, I'll just say, I feel that they would have gone through that, given that applicant one final chance, and I'm more likely to fully support staff's position in that. But right now, I just don't feel like I can support a denial tonight. So that's just where I stand on it.
I have a question just on how we would interpret statement number 4. So like it says, there are unique circumstances to the property which are not created by the landowner. Is that the only criteria they have to meet? Because in the finding, it kind of goes further. So if I took the statement on its own, are there unique circumstances? I think there probably are in the sense that, like, the neighboring property is a foot higher and there were some drainage issues. I think the question is, the statement wouldn't necessitate a variance. I think that's the finding where I would, like, is this the only solution? I would say probably not the only solution. So I think, in the interpretation, do we have to say that this has to be the only solution? Or do we just have to say there are unique circumstances where a variance could be appropriate in this case?
And I'd have to, go
Can we
ahead.
let Julie or Adam answer
Yeah,
that
go ahead.
before we move? Or Anthony?
I may have to have you restate a portion of that question or statement, Commissioner.
The point being, right, that if there seems to be some kind of a unique circumstance with draining here, right? And so ultimately, the point is, though, that there's more than one way to solve for that, right? They could have done a swale, they could have done something else to do that. So we just because there is a unique circumstance doesn't mean we approve this, because there are other ways to solve for that, right?
Maybe. But that's what I'm saying. I don't think
That's the question I'm posing is, like, does finding number 4, does the conclusion have to be, this is the only solution, and that's why we are going to approve the variance? Or if there's multiple solutions, this being one of the solutions, does that support statement 4 that there are unique circumstances to the property which are not created by the landowner?
Madam Chair and Commissioners, and I would also refer to the application that the Planning Commission reviewed last month, and, taking that statement just on its face of unique circumstances, and I think a previous applicant had argued that, well, their property is unique, and you can take that a step further. Every property has unique circumstances, but it's tying it to that reasonable enjoyment or use of their property, thus necessitating that issuance of a variance or a cementing of a deviation from code that generally applies to the entire city. So I'm not an attorney. I don't want to pretend to be an attorney on this, but often when we look at making findings related to whether it's conditional uses or variances, looking at the criteria that need to be met. So in this case, for a variance, the 5 findings under those headlines, and I know right now we're focused on that finding number 4, which refers to unique circumstances on the property not created by the landowner. And I would kind of add in parentheses that are prohibiting the landowner from reasonably enjoying their property. But for the issuance of this variance, that's being applied for, which has 2 deviations from city code, both a lot coverage as well as an encroachment within to the drainage and utility easement.
So because there were other ways to solve for the drainage issue, potentially, that's why we're saying there's not a unique circumstances that necessitate this variance.
And I would also probably go as far as to say that the purview of the Planning Commission isn't necessarily to solve an issue, but rather to consider the application for what their request is being made for. Otherwise, that would be a bit of a slippery slope for the Planning Commission to solve any real or perceived issue brought forward to them by a landowner in the community.
If I can, on the executive summary, and I don't know if we can pull it up on the screen or not, but on the executive summary on the top of page 3, it talks about variance standards, and it goes into a little bit more depth than the headlines that we have here. That's number 4, where it's a little shorter. So I think that might get to some of your questions there in terms of what we're actually deciding on, because I think that number 4 read in just with that statement alone, I don't think says as much as the variance standards piece, which is on, like I say, the top of page 3 on the executive summary on the.
Yeah.
So according to, sorry, Commissioner, section 11-12-2G of the city code is the reference you're referring to, which is included on top of page 3 of staff's memo.
And so for the audience that doesn't have the report in front of them, I will read these couple of sentences. While weighing a variance request against these criteria, there are also 2 key issues to consider. The first is whether the applicant has a reasonable use of their property without the variance. The second is whether the project can be redesigned to eliminate or reduce the need for a variance. And then it goes into these 5 findings. So those are the
Yes.
the pieces that you were referring to. Brenda, I feel like I cut you off before. Did you have a question that you were trying to chime in on? I'm sorry.
I think mine was just, I am torn between both things, like the fact that it's already in, it's a nice driveway, his neighbor doesn't care. There wasn't proof that it was a drainage, or that, it's going to cause the city to have drainage issues when he might have solved his own drainage issue. So that's part of the fact that I feel like, okay, I can't say I feel. The fact that his driveway is in and that the remedy is obviously out of our hands for that. That's the city attorney. But I know, like, typically if something doesn't meet something, enough trees or enough green space or this or that, and there's findings of shortages or lack of, they have to pay a fee or a fine. So that's kind of where my mind is going, like, it's in, if this person has that kind of, that's where my mind goes, because we've done that before for other things. So again, out of our control, out of our realm of authority, but I have to stick with where I've said as far as number 4 has been met in my opinion.
For me, I think number 4 is proving to be a high threshold for any sort of variance approval. And I think for me, I didn't, if I have to interpret it, which I do, how it's stated, and I do not see that this met number 4 at this point.
Is the language for that is just, in the actual code, the language is, there are unique circumstances to the property which are not created by the landowner? That's
Correct.
it, right?
Yeah.
So I think, like, my position would be that that's what we look at. This other stuff in the findings that staff has written, to me, that's not what the code states. I think we're just looking for unique circumstances, and if the property owner is providing evidence of these unique circumstances in the record, then it's up to staff and us to weigh whether that's sufficient unique circumstances to meet this criterion.
I think while the code has the unique circumstance statement with number 4 that we're looking at on the screen, the code also has the language about, first, if the applicant has reasonable use of their property without the variance, and if there's a project that can be redesigned to eliminate or reduce the need for the variance. So I think that's what, if there's a drainage issue, because the house next to them stands a foot taller, but and I know the roof slopes, it does look like there's gutters on that house next door, but there is possibly a way to redesign or eliminate that issue of drainage that would reduce the need for a variance. So that's where my head goes, is that if I use that as a unique circumstance, that the house next to it sits 12 inches higher and drains down, that the project the issue could have been eliminated to reduce the need for a variance by other means, most likely. Now, without engineering here,
Yeah, that's right. And that's what, I agree, I'm right with you there. But like I said before, I don't know if we know for certain. We're speculating. We're not the experts, we're not the engineers. And so we're thinking that, oh yeah, that could have been redesigned differently. Well, I don't think we have evidence in the record to support that. And that's what I'm saying. I can't approve a denial. And I'm also not ready to approve a variance because I don't believe there's enough analysis of whether these are unique circumstances or not, and whether that could have been redesigned in a different way or should have been. That's where I stand.
Right, well, so, but we want people, the city's really helpful, I think, for these. We want people to follow code. We want them to come and get their approvals before they start to build. We want to engage in those discussions about alternative options, as it says here, whether the project can be redesigned or to eliminate or reduce. We can't have people just doing what they think they want to do, not paying attention to the code, and then looking for forgiveness afterwards, I think. When this happens, to me, it becomes an issue for the city attorney. I mean, they didn't follow any of the rules here, really. I don't want to speculate on, any of the thought that went behind this, but to me, it seems pretty clear that they did not follow the procedures. There was some communication. And really, I think to me, it's still something we deny, and it becomes a discussion with the city attorney and how the city feels that they should handle this with the applicant.
That's where I'm at too. Your thoughts mirror mine, that I think that this falls into the city attorneys to help kind of work towards hopefully a resolution that can work. But with the information we have, I don't see where there's enough uniqueness to the property that I would approve the variance.
Any other comments? I'm in the same train of thought as I don't see enough here on unique circumstances. There could possibly be something with engineering, but I feel like most likely we're not going to find the unique circumstances that couldn't been redesigned to eliminate or reduce the need for the variance. I don't think this would have been the only issue, the only way to solve the drainage issue. And I also think we have to uphold what the process is, and it does stink that it's in already, but that we can't consider that as part of our consideration tonight, that it's already in, because otherwise we would have everybody going and putting stuff in before they come forward, before they follow the process. And so with that, are we ready to entertain a motion?
Yeah, I've been vocal about it, so I'll do it. A motion to adopt a resolution denying a variance from the R1 low-density residential maximum lot coverage standard and off-street parking and loading standard to reduce the minimum side yard setback requirement from 5 feet to 0 feet, and to increase the maximum lot coverage standard from 30% to 37% for an existing driveway extension to remain on the property at 3574 152nd Street West.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Reed, seconded by Commissioner Bugai. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. This item is a final decision tonight by the Planning Commission. It does not go forward to City Council. The Planning Commission acts as the Board of Appeals and Adjustments. There is a 10-day appeal period in which an appeal can be made to city staff, and then the appeal process will begin. Moving on to our next item on the agenda this evening, it is a request by Wayne Transports for approval of a site plan review to construct an addition to an existing office building at 14345 Conley Avenue. I will turn it over to Anthony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a request for a site plan review for a property in the eastern portion of the city, just east of Highway 52 at the Wayne Transports truck terminal. Staff does find that the site plan meets the requirements and standards of the city code and recommends approval. The proposed addition is 5,240 square feet, and that is an addition to the 10,000 square foot building. The site is currently below the minimum building size for the general industrial zoning district, which is 10% of the site must be comprised of buildings. The addition does bring that further into conformance. Otherwise, as I said, the site plan does meet all the other standards of the general industrial zoning district. So the site location map before you, you can see Highway 52 running north-south through the middle of that aerial image there. County Road 42 running east and west just south of the subject parcel. Subject parcel is located on Conley Avenue. And here's just a close-in of the site aerial. The proposed addition would be built on the east side of the building towards the southern half of the structure, creating an L-shaped building. The building would take up some of the existing parking. Therefore, additional parking is being proposed just east of that building, as shown on this attached site plan. The site, the addition does meet the front and side yard setbacks of 75 and 50 feet, as well as the lot coverage maximum. The proposed addition will add 0.16 acres of impervious to the site, which will bring it up to 69.96. The existing lot coverage is 69.14%. And as I said, the minimum building size is being increased to bring it closer to that minimum 10% area in the general industrial zoning district. The current building area for the entire site is 5.1%. With the addition, it'll be 5.67%. Also note, these are being reviewed. These have been reviewed against the general industrial zoning district. With the newly adopted zoning code, this would be in the I-1 zoning district, I believe. But the standards are the same, so the development pattern of the site remains unchanged, whether from the old code or the new. But given that the application was received prior to council adoption of that code, this is what staff is going with for this review. With regards to parking, the site is well parked. You can see the table before you shows a total of 94 spaces required. The site does contain 159 parking spaces, and those are for the entire site and all buildings on it. With regards to the building materials and massing, the building height, it's a flat roof, therefore it's measured from grade to the bottom of the roof truss. That's 22 feet, well below the 75-foot building height maximum in this zoning district. The code also requires elevations facing right-of-way to be comprised of the list of materials before you, namely glass, brick, natural stone, more architectural or design-focused materials, whereas the other elevations can be 40% those materials and 60% finished steel or aluminum, more industrial in design. Staff does find that these materials meet the code requirements, and as seen here on the renderings, you can see a substantial amount of glass is provided on that north and east corner of the addition, as well as some architectural metal paneling in both gray and red materials, as well as the first floor using some brick material that's consistent with the existing office building that is being added onto. As I said, the elevations show a building height of 22 feet at the highest point. You can see those mixes of materials a little better here. I do also have a floor plan. It's kind of hard to see here, but the renderings and the plan do show a pretty wide open area with the space to park one of the applicant's trucks there as a sort of display. Otherwise, the floor plan contains office space, large and small conference rooms. There's also a mezzanine level above that those conference areas. The open atrium portion of the building here is open above as well. And I would defer to the applicant on what their actual use for that space would be, but going strictly from the architectural drawings provided. The applicant will be replacing 6 trees removed to accommodate the addition, as well as placing foundation plantings. The minimum required for those foundation plantings is 22 or 1 per 10 linear feet. The applicant's landscape plan shows 74, and those are all focused kind of in that main entrance area, the more visible portion of the site. Lastly, the utilities on the site will be the existing ones. It'll be served by the existing utilities. There is a water main existing that runs north and south right through where the proposed addition will be located. That water main will be directed around the addition area there. Also would like to note there's an existing trash enclosure that will continue being used on the west side of the building. No new enclosure is being provided with this. Therefore, staff finds that the proposed addition meets the requirements of the General Industrial Zoning District and is recommending approval subject to the applicant receiving building permits.
as well as conformance with the requirements of the city engineer contained within the engineer's memo. With that, I can take some questions from the commission.
Thank you. Are there any questions at this time for Anthony? Okay, thank you. This item is a public hearing item this evening, so at this time, we will open up the public hearing. Anyone in the audience who would like to speak may do so at this time, coming to the podium, stating your name and address for the record. Seeing no one, I will make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Kenninger, seconded by Commissioner Biedner. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Public hearing is now closed. I think the building looks great. I think it looks really nice. It's exciting to see the additional investment out there and to bring that, add on to that site. So I think it's a very exciting project.
I agree. I mean, I really do like it actually because that area, it can be kind of industrial over there. This kind of makes it, stand out a little bit. It's, really nice design. So I think it's a great addition.
I think it'll fit well in that industrial area. So with that, I will make a motion to approve the site plan for the 5,240 square foot addition to the existing office building at 14345 Conley Avenue, subject to the conditions 1 and 2 as listed in the staff report.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Kenninger, seconded by Commissioner Whitman. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This item does not go forward to City Council. It does not require council action, so this is the final decision on this item this evening. The next item and final item in our public hearing section this evening is a request by my credit union for an approval of a PUD final site and building plan for a conditional use permit for drive-through facilities. I'm sorry, final site and building plan and a conditional use permit for drive-through facilities. Julia, I will turn it over to you.
All right. All right, so a little bit of a summary of the request. So my credit union is requesting a PUD final site and building plan and a conditional use permit to construct an 8,183 square foot financial institution with drive-through facilities on a 1.88 acre site located within the recently approved Rosewood Commons 3rd Edition plat area. The applicant will also be requesting a minor amendment to the Rosewood Commons Plan Unit Development Agreement to reduce the number of vehicles that can be stacked in financial institution drive-throughs from 6 vehicles per lane to 4 vehicles per lane. So a little overview of the site location. So the site is located within that recently approved Rosewood Commons 3rd Edition area, which that addition did create 5 commercial buildable lots. And it's located directly north of County Road 42 and then west of Business Parkway. So a little bit of overview of the site plan. So like I had mentioned, the area is 1.88 acres in size, and that land use designation is CC Community Commercial. Like I had mentioned, the site will contain an 8,130 square foot financial institution with a 1,230 square foot partial basement. The main level of that building will contain offices, transaction area, employee break room, restrooms, waiting area, business center, community room, and then also a garage. The partial basement area will contain areas for storage, mechanical and electrical uses, and then a server room. The principal building is located in the central portion of the property, which you can see on that site plan shown on the screen, with the main entrance into the building on the southwestern portion of the building, and then there's a secondary entrance into the site in the northeast corner, which where that community room and business room will be up on that northern portion of the site. And then there will be a 3-lane drive-through area located on the eastern side of the building, which you can see located directly east of the main building. So access and parking, there is one main access shown to the site from 149th Street West, which you can see is to the north of this site. The access is shown on the northeast side and will have shared access with future commercial development to the east. Traffic flow is shown to circulate throughout the site with drive aisles shown on the eastern and western side, which will also share for future development with those properties to the east and west. The proposed drive-through, you can see, is going to be accessed from the southeastern end of the site. The drive-through will be a one-way with the option of either exiting to the right to exit out to 149th Street West or to continue west to go to the parking area or future commercial development site to the west. Parking is shown to be located on the northern area, western, and southern portions of the site. The applicant's original plan did show 72 parking stalls, but after discussions with the applicant, they did decrease that to 52 stalls, which is over the required 20 stalls that would be required for the site. But with that area that they took out from the parking, it will be green space or landscaped area until that parking is needed in the future, if that is the case. So overview of the landscaping plan and also park dedication. So the applicant's landscaping plan shows a total of 28 trees and 73 foundation plantings, which does meet that requirement. The minimum requirement for foundation plantings is 47, so they do exceed that amount. And then the minimum requirement for trees is 27 trees, so they do meet that minimum as well. Also, a minimum of 10% of site's parking areas must be landscaped, and within that landscaping, 1 tree per 250 square feet must be provided. Due to the reduction in the parking, though, it is a requirement of a condition of approval that they do update the landscaping plan to reflect that reduction in parking. The developer of Rosewood Commons 3rd Edition had requested the park dedication fees, though, be collected at the time of building permit. So with that, a cash dedication fee for the site will be $16,920. So site lighting, so the site will have a combination of wall and pole-mounted lighting. The pole-mounted lights will be 25 feet in height, which meet the requirement. The plan does overall adhere to the lumen requirements, but staff will need to verify with the applicant that those at the eastern and western boundary lines do not exceed the requirement of 1.0 lumen for those boundaries. And then kind of an overview of the floor plan and elevations as well. So the elevations show a mixture of materials that meet the requirement for the zoning district for at least 50% brick or stone. The facade will have a mixture of split face stone, smooth face stone, aluminum siding, pre-finished composite metal panels, and then also glass. You can kind of see in the floor plan that the entrance, like I had mentioned, is in that southwestern corner with that community room in the northeastern corner, and as well as the drive-through to the east of the building. And then we do also have some 3D renderings showing the facade of the building and also the drive-through area on the eastern side with the parking shown as well. They did eliminate some of that parking you can see in the upper right-hand corner to the east of the drive-through facility, so they did take out some of that parking when they eliminated those 20 stalls. And a couple more 3D renderings of the site. And a little overview of the conditional use permits. So there are 7 general standards for all CUPs, which includes stated here, which this CUP did meet all those standards. And then there are also 7 standards specific to drive-throughs. All the standards were met except for condition 2, which is shown here with the stacking. They did not meet that 6 vehicle stacking requirement, so the applicant is requesting that minor amendment to the Rosewood Commons Planning Development to reduce that from 6 vehicles per drive-through to 4 vehicles. And that will go to City Council if this item is approved to the July 16th meeting. So recommendation, staff is recommending a motion to approve the planning and development final site and building plan for my credit union to construct a financial institution, subject conditions 1 through 7. And then also a motion to recommend the City Council approve a conditional use permit allowing drive-through facilities for my credit union, subject to conditions 1 through 2. I can answer any questions that the commission may have, but I do know there are representatives of the applicant that are present as well.
Thank you, Julia. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
I have a question. So when we talk about it being a minor amendment, is that a term of art or is that editorial? So are we requesting an amendment that we think is minor, or is it a minor amendment?
It's a minor amendment,
Okay.
yeah, and it's a condition of approval with that conditional use permit, but a minor amendment is just under the purview of the City Council, so that's why we are saying it outright as a conditional of
Understood. Thank
approval
you.
with the CUP.
Julia, and I got a question, but part of it may need to come from the applicant. Can you show us on that 3D rendering kind of the flow of the traffic coming in? Like, it looks like it'll be coming in from the east, maybe?
Yeah, I can
and then
kind of
making
show
it-
you on the site plan, so you can kind of see it there with the arrows. It's kind of flowing circular around the building. So there are, so it's kind of coming in from 49th and then moving west south. Like I had said, though, the main entrance is on that south part, so you're going to see a lot of that traffic coming, more flowing counterclockwise. But also, I'm sure the applicant can speak on that a little more as well.
And they could come in straight and head south, right?
Yep,
And then
yep, that
over.
drive aisle will be located there as well, and does have access from either end to enter into that drive-through facility.
Okay, and then the four-car stacking, is that what we're seeing on the visual here?
Yes,
Is
correct.
that pretty close to the length of the cars? And so if we had 4 cars there, or I should say 6, if we had 6 cars, they'd be backed up a little bit into that lane and slightly turning around it?
Yeah, so that's why they were asking for that reduction. Again, the applicant might be able to speak a little more on that, but they believe that the 4 stacking with the 3 available drive-through would be sufficient enough for the site,
Okay.
for the level of traffic that they see.
Yeah, 'cause I will hold off for the applicant, but I would like to understand, especially if they have one lane open, and if they got 6 cars lined up or more, how, operationally, how they would handle that situation.
I do know that my credit union has a few buildings out there and a few businesses, so they might be able to speak on that, how they see stacking, at least at their other facilities.
Yeah, or how they, like if they operate with one lane open
Yeah.
a lot, or how that works. I think that's a good call out on the lanes. Any other questions for staff on this item?
Have we previously waived that kind of 6 stacking for other businesses?
Yes, so as you may remember, First State Bank of Rosemount over near Akron Avenue and County Road 42, that was recently approved by the commission. There was also a minor amendment to that PUD for the Prestwick Place PUD to reduce that from 6 stacking vehicles to 4. So that site is in particular that reduced that stacking as well.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Biedner, we haven't reduced it for other uses, and as far as since I've been here, only for financial institution. Like restaurants, it's not something that we've reduced.
Okay. I was just curious, because like if it's constantly being amended, whether you just update the code to be more reflective of the intent of what you're wanting anyways.
Yeah, like Anthony had stated, this was the only other time that we had done that was for another financial institution, which was First State Bank of Rosemount.
Any other questions for staff? Julia, are there thoughts? I appreciate that they reduced the parking.
Mm-hmm.
They still have more than double what's needed. Are there thoughts on potentially reducing it even further?
That might be a discussion to have with the applicant in regards to that.
Well, I mean, not something we commonly do of reducing. We usually see people not meeting parking, but
Yeah,
we've talked
again,
a
they
lot
meet
about-
the standard, and they did reduce it, but that's something that if
Yeah,
the
we talked about
commission
more green
feels.
space and less,
Yeah.
less coverage, and that seems like potential, but maybe there's reasons to keep it as well. And then, I don't know, and I'm channeling my Mike Tilley, our previous commissioner, with these questions, and I think it's probably more for the applicant. The building colors, I know when we did our visioning exercises back, 3-4 years ago now, with the different nodes that we looked at. So this node at 3 and 42 and Business Parkway, the node at 145th, out at Akron, and then at 52. We talked about, really having some more continuity with the buildings in those areas, more earth tones within the facades. And so this one, I know some of their other buildings, I think their Richfield and Bloomington East building look to have less of the vibrant red and more earth tones in the building, and then the kind of the logo, the building signage has the classic signature red on it. I don't know if that's an option, but I'm just thinking what we really were trying to go for is continuity between these nodes of having that uniform look with all the buildings in that area. So I don't know if that's, obviously it's something we can't require, but I don't know if there's any thoughts or any options with that to try and make them all, instead of them standing out.
I actually like the red. I feel like I don't live in Arizona if everything's all tan and.
Ah, well, there you go. Yeah, I think one of the thoughts when we did those visioning exercises was calling out, instead of, you drive down and you see the Burger King and the Holiday, and they all just standalone. There's no, if you think about some of the developments like in Maple Grove or the Egan area off of Pilot Knob, like where they're all very, those buildings all have very similar facades. And so maybe we can't do that here, but maybe we can think about it as we develop those other nodes.
Yeah, I would definitely defer to the applicant for that, but I know I did touch base with one of the representatives with their consultant, and they did say that it'd be similar to one of their Bloomington locations, but again, I would defer to the applicant regarding that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I think it was the Bloomington East that seemed to have more neutral facades. Okay, any other comments?
All right, thank you.
At this time, we will open up the public hearing for this item. Anyone wishing to speak in the audience may do so at this time, coming to the podium, stating your name and address for the record.
My name is Greg Worthen, president of my credit union. Address?
Yes, your address. You can use my credit union address or your
My credit, 9550 Lindell Avenue, Bloomington, Minnesota, 55420. Just to speak to a couple of the comments on the parking. The 30 years I've been doing this, I would say this is the first time ever I've been asked to reduce parking. This is always a battle, and it's always the other way. So yes, I am happy to reduce parking. I do want to leave enough spots because we are planning a community room in the back that pretty much anyone that's a member.
So maybe it makes sense. I just know that we.
Yeah, green space definitely. The facade of the building, and the architect can talk a little bit more about this, but I don't think the pictures are that great, but it has a lot of the same characteristics. It's the same stone as on our other buildings. So the majority of it's a brownish mix of earth tones. So if you've ever been or seen our Lindale main office, that same materials are going to be on it. When you look at this, it looks pretty flat and pretty.
It looks like it's a contrast between red and white, but you're saying it's not really as stark a contrast.
If you look at our other buildings, this actually has less red on it than most of our others. So whenever you go to Lindale, you'll see a lot more red. You go to our old Shakopee Road branch, there's a significantly more red on it too. But I feel like there was a third question that I missed.
If you have more than 4 cars, the
Stacking, thank you.
How are you going to handle that? Yeah.
I would say it's a rarity to have more than 2 nowadays. No one goes to the financial institution, and very few people are going to sit in line for more than 30 seconds if you have to. Very rarely do we only have 1 lane open unless something's really broken. But I couldn't see that for quite a while. But I would say normal stacking is 1 car in a lane. If there's 2, most people won't stop. They'll go. I mean, who goes to a credit union or a bank nowadays? So. Stacking 6 cars maybe 20 years ago would have been normal, even 4 now. I would say 2 would be sufficient, but 4 fits obviously. So.
Do you, is there a time where you would have only one of those lanes open, so you would have potentially longer stacking?
I can't say it would never be 1 lane, but usually the only reason we have 1 lane open would be because something's broken on the others. But there's no reason one person can handle multiple lanes. Plus, you got the tellers inside versus the tellers in the drive-up area, so it's easy to manage multiple lanes.
Okay. Is there an ATM also in that drive-up area?
There'll be an ATM in the outside lane, if I remember correctly. Yes.
The outside third lane is an ATM drive-up.
Yes.
Okay.
And I can't remember for the life of me if we're actually going to have a drive-up lane in that or not. So I'll let Josh speak to that.
Because that would mean you'd only have 2 drive-up lanes then if the third one is only
There is an
ATM.
ATM planned as of this moment in that outside lane, but as cash is going away, we're not deciding if we're using an ATM or not.
How many drive-up lanes do you have at your other branches? I apologize if you just said that.
The main office, we have 4. Richfield, we have 3. OSR, we have 2.
Okay. And this one could
Inver
have.
Grove Heights, we have 2, I believe.
And so this one may have 2 plus a ATM.
Yes. But in our main office in Lindale, we actually, on the fourth one also had an ATM in it, so you can do both at one. So with that many drive-up lanes. So with 3, we could have a drive-up lane and an ATM. It just makes the ATM a little harder to get to. But not as many people use ATMs as they used to. So.
Okay. Any other questions at this time for the applicant? Anything else you want to share?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak on this item, they may do so at this time, coming to the podium, stating your name and address for the record.
Sure. My name is Josh Longo, HTG Architects, 1010 Main Street in Hopkins. Thank you to staff for presenting. Thank you all for your time tonight. Appreciate it. Address a few of the things. Number one, the renderings definitely somewhere in the transition of making the PDFs got blown out a little bit on the contrast. So everything that looks white is more of a stone, actually. So the anticipated, like you said, some of the other locations, those materials, that should be better reflected in the renderings, and unfortunately, it's not at this time. To address some of the other concerns, parking. I know there is, that's something we'll definitely work with staff, continue to work with staff on to, find a common point. I do know there's some concern about having enough parking for the community room if there's a larger event and accommodate, not shortchange the traffic to the branch. So we want to make sure we can find a good balance. I think the proof of parking though is a great way. If we find we need more, there is the ability to add more if we find we're short. Drive-through stacking. I design almost exclusively financial institutions. I've been doing it for about 20 years. About 20 years ago, I would have said you're nuts. Today, more than two is in a lane, as was mentioned, is rare. Most people, they see 2 cars, maybe 3, they'll go inside, or they'll come back later. So, that is something that I do somewhere in excess of 10 financials a year. So, I can speak expert opinion on that.
Okay. And can you confirm if the third lane here is a full drive-through lane and ATM, or is it
It
just?
is ATM only at this time. Sometimes what we will do, though, is we'll put the tube in the future if they do need to add an additional tube lane. They could do that. Typically, we'll see the ATM traffic and the tube aren't really, they're kind of complementary. So people that use the ATM aren't always coming during the day. It's more after hours. And vice versa, people coming to use the tube is more during the day. But we would, something to evaluate if we find there's a need. A lot of times people will go to that first drawer, that's their primary, so we've got that first lane, and there's a night deposit in that first lane as well.
Okay. Are there any questions for the architect? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Evan.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like?
Yeah, sorry, I'm John DeBedignis, 13407 Daffodil Path, Rosemont. I'm the Chief Experience Officer, so I can speak a little bit more to the drive-up situations. At our branches, very rarely do we have 3 cars in line. And kind of the reason being, when you look at the 6-car stacking rule, a lot of the fast food restaurants have one window, and they're serving their customers through that one window. So those cars are going to get backed up based on the quickness of their delivery of their food. For the financial institutions, these transactions are going to be a lot quicker. And when I mean that, they're not opening accounts, they're not doing things that are going to delay the line. They're usually coming in to cash a check, deposit a check, make a payment, usually quicker transactions. During COVID was really the only time that we saw a backup in the drive-up lanes. And the most that we had at our Lindo location with those lanes was 4 cars stacked back. And that was just because we closed the offices, made all of our members go through the drive-up. Some of those transactions did take a little bit longer just because we were requiring that separation at that time. But for the most part, these transactions are very quick. If it's going to take longer than that, like Greg was mentioning, the members will come inside. It's usually a little bit more of a convenient experience for them than the drive-up. But again, the drive-ups are there for those that want to kind of get in and out quickly. And the ATM is in that 3rd stall lane. We can look at adding a 3rd window there. It's not preferable when you have your ATM there just because it can delay those that want to use the ATM versus the transactions. And like I said, usually your 1st and 2nd window are the ones that are going to get used predominantly. So
If you don't add the tube to that 3rd stall, so like I'm looking and I'm like, we really have 2 lanes. There's 3 lanes there, but one's an ATM only, so it's not really a drive-up service lane. If you don't add the tube there and there is a blockage problem, is it something that can be put in after the fact?
yes.
I mean.
Yep.
not horrible, but not ideal, but
Yeah, we could actually, what institutions are doing today is rather than putting in a tube, they'd put in a different type of machine that would handle deposits and transactions that way. We can definitely rough that in. For that capability, I think in our intentions with an ATM, that's probably what we're going to do anyway.
yeah, I mean, I think you guys are the experts, and you're gonna have unhappy customers if it doesn't, so your phone's gonna ring if it doesn't do it. I think my concern is more, if it blocks the drive aisle, then it becomes problematic for anyone, and it also could become problematic for the future buildings to the east and west of it if the drive aisle is blocked.
If it's going back there, yeah.
Commonly. Yeah.
So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience would like to speak on this item this evening? Seeing none, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Kenninger, seconded by Commissioner Reed to close the public hearing. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Public hearing is now closed. Any follow-on comments or questions? Commissioner Reed, are you comfortable with the drive-through?
I am comfortable with the drive.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
It was your question. I wanted to make sure that you were, and I will just share, like, I am fine with the parking as it sits today, but of course, we've continued to try and encourage more green space and more proof of parking in a lot of our developments, so I'm also would be in favor of something closer to the requirement, but I'm will lend to them on how they want to spec it out. I think it's an exciting addition to the community. I actually think it's going to be a great addition to that neighborhood and that area. It is my neighborhood, so I will just disclose, I am right over there, and many of the neighbors are excited about and think it's a great use of property there and are in support of it. So hopefully we will be able to welcome you to Rosemount shortly. And with that, I will make a motion. I will make a motion to approve the planned unit development final site and building plan for, you just flipped. I was reading from the screen. Why did somehow it flipped? Okay, I'm gonna start over. Motion to approve the planned unit development final site and building plan for my credit union to construct a financial institution subject to conditions 1 through 7.
Second.
It has been moved by Commissioner Kenninger, seconded by Commissioner Biedner. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Julia, just a point of clarification, does this one also go to City Council or not?
No.
Okay, so that motion is final this evening. Final decision by the Planning Commission and does not go forward to City Council. I will make a motion on the next one. Motion to recommend the City Council approve a conditional use permit allowing drive-through facilities for my credit union, subject to the following conditions 1 and 2 as listed in the staff report.
Second.
It has been moved by Commissioner Kenninger, seconded by Commissioner Bugai. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That does go forward to City Council on the July 16th meeting. That will move forward to City Council. Thank you. Welcome to Rosemount.
Thanks for investing in Rosemount.
Is there any new business this evening?
Madam Chair, there is not.
Are there any items for discussion this evening?
Nope.
Okay. With that, I will adjourn the meeting. Meeting adjourned.